then just keep asking for the same things over and over again in the hope that they will actually listen to us one of these days and, reduce rents or increase HAP limits or, all of those things that we ask for. The communities have evolved now to kind of meeting the local need and the regional need of where they are. So Galway has seen an increase in over 65s experience in homelessness. So they recently launched and opened this beautiful new 10 indoor apartments that are fully accessible and adaptable for over 65s. And we did a report on that. In the Midwest, Simon, they run the food bank, but they run it for the whole area. So all of the charities that would receive kind of food bank packages, and the demand for that has been like, it's just, yeah, it's not nice. It's not nice, but incredible work been done across the country. The monthly homeless figures are out tomorrow at 2 o'clock, right? We already have our press release ready to go, and every month we have our press release prepped for an increase because there isn't a let up in the demand for the services. It's just it's constant. It's awful. It's so much worse than it used to be. Like, some people going to local authorities and not even been getting a housing needs assessment done, just kind of been turned away. Because there's areas around the country and in Dublin as well where there just is no emergency accommodation anymore. So we've seen the increase in private emergency accommodation operators who are there for profit, and people aren't getting the supports that they might need. So until we start seeing a slowdown in demand for the services, we're going to just keep prepping month on month for an increase. So no, it's really, really awful. It's so frustrating that the rent changes were brought in for the 1st of March and didn't deal with affordability. Like, we're constantly saying it, and what we're told is there will be a constitutional challenge. Landlords will bring it, say that their constitutional right to private property are being infringed. And it's like, well, at what point did the constitutional rights of the 5,000 plus children in emergency accommodation, the government talk about balance all the time, but I think we're long past the balance tipping in favor of landlords rather than people who need homes. Well, the last 10 years, really, like, we've been calling it a crisis for a decade. When family homelessness started to increase so much, and it's down to the private rental sector and notice of terminations, a lot of no fault evictions, and then there just aren't the affordable alternatives for people. It's one of those really frustrating things as well, Regan, where, like, it's the simple economics of, if you hold supply and demand, and if you hold back supply, demand increases and the price goes up. If you say that, you're told that you're just simplifying it and we need supply and all of that kind of stuff. But, like, we were just talking in the office this morning, the amount of voids that there are in local authorities around the country. There should be absolutely zero voids in local authorities if they have a housing need and they have people with housing needs. The short-term lets thing is a huge thing as well. Like, that regulation that was going to be brought in and then it was watered down. There's enough vacant properties and homes around the country that we could actually house everyone who needs it. So I think the thing that's gotten worse in the last 5 years is it greed? Is it an acceptance of some people deserve to have loads of properties and profit and then others don't? Like, and it's not only in Ireland, it's across Europe. It's the financialization of what should be a basic human right. But again, when you talk like that, you're kind of just called, idealistic or whatever. But it's like, we know that in the longer term, the impact that homelessness is having on people's mental health and well-being and physical health is actually going to cost the state more in the longer term rather than putting money into prevention now. Like, obviously we're in there and we're doing our lobbying work and our advocacy work, and then you have the likes of the Property Owners Association and the Construction Federation and whoever in lobbying. And I think because again, it's that balance of whose voice is valued more. And I do think there's a bit of fear mongering where the department officials are told, well, if you bring in more regulation, then we're all just going to leave the sector and then you'll have less homes to rent. And, so there's just a really, it's just really unfair at the moment. Like, I think, I know we said this at the end of last month when the figures came out again, that at some point there's going to have to be a constitutional challenge. At what point do we say property rights trump a child's well-being and mental health, or a person who has been, doing really well and regained their life, and then they're evicted from the private rental sector, and they're starting from scratch again. It's just so unfair. But again, it's not unique to Ireland. It's happening across Europe where rents are going up. So we would hope that the security of tenure piece will make a difference. I don't like talking too much, and I don't know how you'd bring this into your piece on hidden homelessness. Is we know that the more kind of fatalistic we are, then if you're experiencing it and you're experiencing hidden homelessness, then that's what you're seeing in the media, and that's going to make you feel worse. So I suppose that's why we do keep turning up at the meetings with the government, and we keep saying the same things over and over again. Like, change does happen, it just happens very, very slowly. Like even with the HAP review, that's something we've been calling for years. So it happens too slowly. It would be really great if more people mobilized around homelessness. Like, I think what we saw recently with the fuel protests, actually loads of people have said that to me. They were like, why don't we have that for housing and homelessness? Why aren't people coming out the way we saw for like the water protests and stuff like that? So I don't know, that's a bigger question around, I don't know if it's to do with the shame or stigma, or but I think until we have that kind of that groundswell of movement, it's kind of the same voices at the decision rate. Like, we do need that kind of the public outrage. I think interventions happening, there are exits happening, they're just not at a large enough scale. But unless we start, like, the figures that we talk about every month are just the local authority emergency accommodation figures, so they're not including hidden homeless, as you said. Actually, in the north, they include everyone on the social housing waiting list in their homeless figures, because their point is, if you've been found to have a social housing need, overnight you could end up needing homeless accommodation, because like that, you can't sleep on the family's couch anymore, or whatever it is. So we have, I think it's something like 56,000 people on the social housing waiting list. We've 17,000 people in emergency accommodation. We have, I think it's about 5,000 people in IPAS accommodation who have been granted, who are told that they can stay, they're allowed stay and allowed work, but can't find anywhere to move out. So we can't fix the problem unless we're being honest about the numbers. And something that I started saying this year, the last couple of months, that I think has been getting me into a bit of trouble with the landlords, is the Irish Property Owners Association and the others. Like, it's not good enough if they're just going in saying, oh, well, more regulation is going to make us leave. They need to be coming with solutions. Now, what we do think in some communities of Ireland, the work that we do on the Locked Out the Market report, HAP is imperfect. It is by no means perfect at all, but the limits have not kept pace with the market rents. So something that would make a difference, overnight, would be increasing the HAP limits. And we know that there's more supply kind of coming on and stuff like that. So it's, the government talk all the time about, we're using all the levers at our disposal. And we would argue and say that, well, they're not really, they're tinkering around the edges of some of them. So like the short-term lets, the voids, vacant properties, dereliction, and actually on the Simon.ie website. So we did a report on hidden homelessness 2 years ago with Simon Northern Ireland. the Simon Week, I think 3 years ago or 2 years ago, was around vacancy and dereliction. So, we'll gather the evidence and the policy recommendations, and we'll bring them in. There is going to be a homeless prevention framework published soon, and we've done a big submission to that. That will work if it's funded and if it's resourced. So it's been prioritised in discussions and in the policy papers, and I think they'll say it's the biggest thing, that they're working on. But if it's not coming up for the voters, if the constituents are not banging on their doors and sending emails about housing and homelessness, then like you saw it with the fuel protests, like how quickly, there was movement on that. So like the government are going to move on what their constituents are making the most noise about.
Yeah.
I know they'll say that there's, it's the biggest investment, that's ever been made in housing and all of that kind of stuff. But particularly with homelessness, we're seeing that going into the private emergency accommodation operators. So, if you're like, homelessness in itself is a trauma. So even if like that you're experiencing it because of economic issues and because of the rent, that insecurity and instability and stress is going to impact on your physical and mental health. So you may need those health interventions throughout your time in emergency accommodation or after it. But if you're in like a hostel or a hotel or a B&B or a guest house, you're just getting the roof over your head. So there are really good charities across the country providing, really, really key, really important services, and that additional, the wraparound supports, and you're left kind of saying you have to fundraise for services rather than actually the state providing the cost that's needed to cover them. We're seeing we get a lot of contacts from people who are going to local authorities. If you present to a local authority, so say for example you're escaping domestic violence, and so you go to Roscommon because you don't want to be anywhere near Dublin, and they can say, and they have been saying to people, no, you haven't been living here, you have to go back to Dublin, to your local authority, where you have this local connection. So we've been seeing increasing numbers of families contacting us, and they've been sent from pillar to post, and then we put them in touch with Mercy Law Resource Centre, who takes these kind of legal cases. Now, they never end up going to court because the local authority is usually in the wrong and it gets sorted, but it means then we don't have that legal case and the legal precedence for it to be stopped. So that's been an increasing issue. If the kids are in school and you're in work or college or whatever, like there isn't enough weight being put on the connections that you might have in a community, and then you're being put in an emergency accommodation out somewhere. Yeah, and it's like we've seen it as well with, if you maybe you've come through addiction, and you've gotten clean and sober and you're doing really well, and you want to, so say if you were Cork City, but you want to move away from Cork City because that's where your peers were when you were using. So there's this, like, I can understand some of the local connection piece where I think originally it was to try and stop everyone coming to Dublin, but it just means then that people are getting stuck in these rules that are there's no legal basis for them, but the hidden homelessness thing, like, there's no way of us knowing what the real, the true figures are. We have done some stuff with Ipsos and some public surveys, kind of, well, what do people think of when they think of homelessness? And hidden homelessness isn't coming up. So I think people think, like, if you have somewhere to stay at all, even if it's a couch, that you're not technically experiencing homelessness. So there's probably a bit of work to be done around that as well. But I don't know if you get this, if like media just want to speak to people with lived experience.
Yeah.
And people don't want to, they might or might be okay sharing like a quote or a case study or something anonymous. But like that, if you have kids, the school probably don't even know that they're experiencing homelessness,
Yeah.
and then their faces in front. So it's that thing of, I don't know how we can mobilize the public to be more active about it, when usually it's the personal stories that do that. But then it's so unfair to ask people to share their stories and their trauma. Particularly when there's people who might speak out, and then landlords will say, well, I'm not renting to you
Yeah,
because
exactly. Yeah.
you know. So I don't know how we change hearts and minds without that kind of personal connection like that we had, during the previous referenda and stuff like that.